The Triumph Daytona 955i, everybody. You guys know how much I absolutely love this motorcycle, and the more I ride it, the more I realise that these old bikes, you know what, they really weren't that far off what we have today. If you look at a Supersport right now, and what Supersport was like 20 years ago, as in the case of the Daytona here, then you kind of understand what I'm talking about. So today we're going to be highlighting the differences between the old stuff and the new stuff to make you guys realise how much of a bargain these types of motorcycles truly are. So let's jump on and let's go. Yeah guys, I'm telling you right now, when you pay £2,000 for one of these bikes, whew, and you have a think about how much the new stuff is, the brand spanking new ZX-10R, oh dear, the brand spanking new ZX-10R is going to set you back around about 20 grand, which does sound a little bit outrageous, if you ask me. Alright, so let's compare the specs of something like this to the specs of a modern day Supersport. But you can make the same comparison pretty much across the board. And with some types of bikes, like adventure bikes or even cruisers, the differences are even narrower. So on the Triumph Daytona here, we've got about 145 horsepower at the crank, which tops out at, of course, 11,000 RPM, as you'd expect. And you have around about 100 Newton meters of torque there or thereabouts. So let's compare that to the likes of, well, the ZX-10R. So you're going to be getting around about 210 horsepower. I believe the current generation of ZX-10R, that's how much it's producing. And again, around about 100 Newton meters of torque there or thereabouts. The Supersport formula really hasn't changed all that much in the last 20-25 years or so. You are getting a lot more peak horsepower, but what you're really going to be feeling when it comes to street riding is going to be the torque. And this is the kicker, you guys. If you haven't ridden a Supersport of this era, they're actually a lot better for street riding. Because when I mentioned that torque number, this motorcycle is producing torque all the way through the rev range pretty much. There is a bit of a lull between 4,000 and 5,000 RPM. But to be honest with you, because the way how this bike is geared, most of the time you are actually going to be using a lot of the RPM range in everyday riding, which is good. And you're experiencing the full power of the bike. Whereas a modern day Supersport, believe it or not, you're not feeding any power. And they redline at 15,000 RPM, these modern day ones. And they're producing all of that horsepower right at the very top of the rev range. So you're going to be doing, well, you're pretty much going to be breaking every single speed limit in your country before you even reach the power band of the bike, which does kind of make it sound a little bit ridiculous. But that's just in terms of pure power, performance, things like that. Honestly, you're not really missing out on all that much in terms of the basics. Horsepower, torque, experience. You're not missing out on an awful lot. And it wouldn't surprise me if this Daytona could keep up with the likes of a ZX-10R or something like that in 0 to 60, things like that. When it comes to quarter mile, then yeah, a motorcycle like that is probably going to run away against this bike. So okay, that is in terms of the basics: power, performance, nimbleness. These kinds of motorcycles are pretty much weighing in a very similar amount to their modern day counterparts, especially because they all are built with aluminium frames, so it does kind of make sense from that perspective. But I'm telling you, these old bikes, they feel just as light and nimble as the newer stuff. I think the newer stuff does feel a little bit smaller in the cockpit when you're sitting in it. It does feel like a 600. I think they share a lot of similarities when you're talking about the frame, how big the motorcycle feels in the hands, you know. This bike does feel physically larger, but at the same time, man, this bike's fun. Woo-hoo! Yeah, man. load of fun. But yeah, so even though the modern day stuff might feel smaller in the hands, might feel smaller to ride in terms of the actual riding experience, they are going to feel very similar. But okay, let's talk about all the stuff that you are actually missing, because these days there's a lot of tech goodies in these modern day super sports. So of course you will be missing out on a full color TFT display, which these bikes, yeah, they really don't have. I mean, it's got that digital tack, but yeah, that's about as modern as these bikes get, to be perfectly honest with you. There isn't really much on these old bikes. You haven't got hydraulic clutches, although modern day super sports don't have hydraulic clutches either. I prefer cable clutches, in my humble opinion. I think they ride better, a little bit more feel, but that's just me. ABS, no ABS to speak of on something like this. But if you're a decent rider, ABS isn't something that I think you'll ever really need, even in an emergency situation. I seriously don't see riders using ABS all that much. And to be honest with you, if you have to use ABS and you're using it regularly, you're probably riding wrong. If I'm being totally honest with you guys, maybe slow down a little bit. What else are you missing? Yeah, you're going to be missing things like launch control, maybe cruise control as well, depending on the bike. I can't remember if the ZX-10R has cruise control. I mean, I don't see why it couldn't, because it's got an electro throttle, I think. But at the same time, like, what would you need it for on a super sport? Why would you want cruise control on a super sport? I don't know. But yeah, you could be missing out on that depending on the bike and the model. You'd be missing out on a quick shifter. That is perhaps the thing that I would have liked to have seen the most on a lot of these older super sports, but it's quite new tech, isn't it? So that is going to be perhaps the thing that you guys will miss out on the most. But if you're used to riding without a quick shifter like me, and you have been riding without a quick shifter for the majority of your riding careers, then well, you don't need one. It does make it a little bit quicker when it comes to shifting, and it does help bikes that are geared shorter than this. You know what I mean? If you can get through the gears quicker, then your acceleration is going to be a bit quicker as well. Not by much, but it is going to be a bit quicker. And that's kind of why I like quick shifters, just being able to bang it up a couple of gears, especially, you know, when I'm on my ZH2 and I'm trying to get off the line quickly, because that bike isn't geared the longest. I mean, I think it's geared about the same as this bike, to be honest with you. I think I can probably get between 65 and 70 mile an hour at the top end of first gear. But because that bike is producing so much horsepower, so much torque, I do like having the option to be able to short shift it nice and quick without losing too much time in the 0 to 60 or quarter mile. Just makes things a little bit easier, I suppose. But something like that, even then, something as useful as a quick shifter, not necessary in a lot of ways. Honestly guys, as long as you've got 2 wheels, brakes, suspension, tyres and engines and gears, there's a lot of the same stuff that you can do on a motorcycle like that than a modern day equivalent. Honestly, you go and look it up. If you compare any flagship motorcycle from the late 90s, early 2000s, you compare them to a flagship today, there's not really a lot of differences. You might be interested in higher RPMs and things like that, and yeah, that's fair enough, but even 600s from this era would redline at 15,000 RPM. A lot of you may still remember our Honda CBR 600RR that we used to have at the birth of our channel, and well, I really like that bike. I don't think, to be honest with you, they are really any better or any worse than a modern day one is. And that's me just being brutally honest with you in terms of the riding experiences, is what we're all here for. Riding motorcycles really hasn't changed all that much, and if anything, at least in my humble opinion, when it comes to super sports, they've actually gotten a little bit worse in terms of the riding experience, because they're not really designed for street riding. Yeah, they might have headlights and brake lights and indicators, but they're almost machines that should be ridden exclusively on track. No point having street tires on them whatsoever. Whereas these kinds of motorcycles, yes, they are very aggressive ergonomically, as the modern day stuff is, but at the same time, ooh, sun's bright. But at the same time, they when they were designing these motorcycles, they did have a little bit of that street riding in mind, like how the bikes are geared. A great example, a prime example, the way how the suspension is set up. Yes, it is adjustable, but at the same time, for street riding, you don't really need a harsh suspension. You might as well set it up to be nice and soft, or at least a little bit softer. If you want to pull some wheelies, then maybe tighten it up at the rear, on the rear shock a little bit, if that's what you want to do. But honestly, for the most part, the bikes are a lot the same. There's more the same than there are differences between bikes of the early 2000s, the late 90s, and bikes of today. Perhaps the biggest innovation from that era was fuel injection. I personally prefer fuel injected bikes to carbureted bikes. Not having to balance carbs and things is, I don't know, something I don't really know about all that much. I'm sure that once you've done it a few times, it's easy and it's easy to understand, but there's less maintenance to be done on a fuel injected motorcycle than there is on a carbureted one. It's just ease of use, you know. Don't have to worry about it, because it's all done electronically, isn't it? So it does make our lives a little bit easier. Although in terms of riding experience, honestly, from what I've seen between carbs and fuel injected bikes, there really isn't much of a difference. I think when it comes to peak horsepower, there might be a difference there in terms of the way how the bike feels, or the smoothness of the throttle, because the power is more instantaneous with a fuel injected motorcycle as opposed to a carbureted one. At least in my experience, it just feels a little bit like throttle response feels a little bit better, a little bit nicer on the fuel injected one than a carbureted one, but that's just personal choice. Doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Again, between a carbureted motorcycle and a fuel injected one, it's not really going to feel that different. I'm being perfectly honest with you. It's funny, isn't it? We spend an absolute fortune on newer bikes, but really there isn't a lot of point, to be honest with you. Might as well just save your money and get something that's a little bit older, but maybe something that's a bit different. There's a lot of really good bikes out there that are of this era, maybe even a little bit newer. Up until about 2010, there are loads of motorcycles to choose from. And especially if you're looking at bigger bikes, they'll still have quite a lot of life left in them. A lot of them will anyway. Yeah, you'll have examples of motorcycles that probably on their last legs, but people do have a habit of looking after motorcycles like these over a long period. And then so yeah, when it comes to the longevity of the bikes, well, people like you and me who might be looking at buying a motorcycle like this, maybe one that's a little bit older, we get to benefit from it. Yeah, crazy. What a bike, man. And that's the thing, every single old motorcycle I've bought, I've been really happy with, and if anything, it has over-delivered in my estimations. You know, you don't really think an old bike is going to be that great compared to the new stuff, you know. I don't know, maybe that's just a millennial thing. Who knows, but the old stuff runs just as good as the new stuff, and in some ways, if anything, it runs a little bit better. Yeah, it's crazy, but I'm telling you, if you guys had a go, just test rode a brand spanking new type of motorcycle, whatever that might be, have a look on the used market at one that is a couple of generations older. Maybe have a look at one of those afterwards, after you've done your test ride of the new bike, the brand spanking new one, and just see what the real world differences are between the two when you're actually riding them. Some bikes have really benefited from modern day treatment, and there are experiences like the ZX-10R that I don't think you can get on any other motorcycle, but I could be wrong. Bikes like an SV1000 from Suzuki, or I don't know, maybe an old Suono or something like that might still be pretty damn good, but I don't think that they run quite as well as the ZX-10R. But on the whole, honestly, for the most part, they're very similar in a lot of ways, and like I said, if anything, a little bit better than even the newer stuff. When you look at sport touring, when you look at super sports, even when you look at things like adventure bikes, they really haven't changed all that much. You know what I mean? But anyway, everybody, thank you ever so much for joining us on this lovely autumn morning's ride. It's been quite a nice day today, actually, not been too cold at all. Roads have been a little bit greasier than I was hoping, but hasn't really impacted the ride today, which is good. But yeah, thank you ever so much for watching this one. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Have you ridden the modern stuff and thought, too expensive, not really different enough, not really more exciting than something like this, and ended up buying an old one? Let me know down in the comment section below. But as always, please go ahead, leave that like, hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so you don't miss any more videos championing these old motorcycles, and we'll catch you all in the next video. Everyone take care, ride safe.